Pinkie Pie tenderly finished cleaning and wrapping her wounds. Her leg still throbbed from the bite wound, but at least now it would start to heal properly. She tested her weight on it, and it was still a small bit of pain, but nothing she couldn't handle. She would keep moving, and she could run away if she had to. She then looked at the note that she had placed on the bed once more. It had been resting on the bottom of the balloon's basket, if it had been waiting for her to find it. Laughter and smiles of youth, together as they find out truth, dreams of the future are held, as fears of the past are expelled. She had been dwelling on this note since she had found it. She knew it was a riddle. She wasn't very good with riddles, but her mind had clearly calmed down enough for her to start thinking more coherently. Her brain was finally not reeling from the horror long enough to take this appearing of the words seriously. Well, I guess it's the first line means foals find truth like learning. What sparkled the word for her? Oh, this riddle is about a school, she said, rereading the riddle in the context of the school, and all the lines fit. So does that mean I should head for the school? She asked herself. She then looked around the dissipated room. The balloon was torn apart, and the body was half of a filly. No reason to stay here, she sighed. She then packed up their note and into her bag before grabbing her lantern and headed outside. She shivered as she hit the cold, snowy air once more. She hadn't realized how warm it was, being aside from the buildings. She then turned the lantern off and placed it back in the bag. Then she began to gallop towards the school. She watched carefully behind a tree, as if the lumbering form of the monster paced away from the entrance of the school. It looked just like as if the first monster she had first encountered, the three-legged goner. If there were more of those things, maybe the groaner just had a good thing to call them, she thought to herself. She had stopped buzzing of her phonograph that wouldn't just give her position away, but it seemed to have noticed any sounds, unless she made them. It soon began to lumber away into the fog, turning into the black silhouette of itself. The figure she was now was perfect time to move. She quickly made it to the front of the door of the school and pulled on the handle, trying to get inside quickly. The door jammed by the sound of it being locked. What? It's locked? She said, bewildered. She hadn't experienced it to be locked, not after the riddle had told her to come to the school. Did I get the answer wrong? She asked. She looked at the door again, and then she just noticed above the handle was the lock, was a symbol of a star on it. It felt like a switch, so she flipped on her head. She quickly reached into her bag and pulled out the key Gummy had left for her. Being careful not to undo the ribbon, she placed the key back in the keyhole, and it fitting perfectly. The door unlocked with a satisfying click that made her smile softly. She went to go grab the key and hold on to it again. The key turned into ash, and tiny pieces quickly falling to the ground. She stared at the gift in shock that Gummy had given to her. Only the part that had turned to ash was the ribbon that floated down gently, laying on the outstretched hoof. No, Gummy's gift, she said, her lip quivering as tears threatened to fall once more. She then shook her head quickly, taking in a deep breath of the cold air as she calmed herself down again. She probably cried a lot. If she kept crying, she wasn't going to get out of this situation anytime soon. Besides, she still had the ribbon from the key. She very carefully tied the bow to the end of her mane, and it wouldn't have its frizz to it, but still trying to, at the end, helped her, made her feel like it was a little poofy again. The ribbon gave her comfort. She felt as if Gummy was right beside her while wearing it. She then opened the school door and headed inside. To her surprise, it was fairly well lit. She had been expecting to find her lantern like in the house. The school seemed to have far better than the house did. It had a thick layer of dust, but with the structure not nearly as much as disrepair. Lockers lined the walls, with the hallways led to the classrooms, before an opening to the main auditorium. Signs hung on the walls pointing out the directions to the gym, nurse's office, principal office, and number of classrooms. Huh? She asked. Her ear twitched upon hearing the sound. It sounded like laughter of young foals. She then turned around and headed in the direction of the sound, simply amazed at the sight. She could see the ghostly apparitions of two young foals playing in the hallway. They laughed and pranced around each other before running down the hallway in the direction of the classroom. Pinkie watched as they fade away through the door of the classroom. She quickly turned her head in her bag and listened for the static of her phonograph, but it was silent. Well, maybe those ghosts aren't like the monsters like others, she quietly said to herself. Perhaps if they weren't monsters, they were a sign. She quickly followed after the foals, opening the door to classroom 104. The classroom was quiet as the halls of the school, stagnant with air mixed with layers of dust, but the room gave Pinkie a sense of nostalgia. It was a classroom that she had gone to when she had moved to Ponyville. Memories began to flood in her mind. Well, Miss Pinkelmania Danepie, we recognize that you have been homeschooled for the most of your life, but upon you testing on Ponyville standardized test, your school was not high enough to acknowledge a graduate level for Pony, so we are requiring you to take at least 1 year of public school here in Ponyville, the mayor explained to her. What? I have to go to school? Pinkie said, pouting at her seat on the opposite of the mayor's desk. But learning was so boring. She then stomped her hooves a little in their chair. Now, sis, Octavia said, reaching over and placing a hoof on her sister's shoulder. It won't be that bad. Just think of all the new friends you'll be able to make. You'll have a lot more ponies to invite to your parties, she said comfortedly. But, Pinkie said, looking at her sister with pleading eyes, but she already knew she wanted to spend and spread smiles as much as far as she could. But this was the first time finding her other ponies to be friends with whoever would host a party. She was rather intimidated by the thought that she couldn't go like her parties. Tell you what, Octavia said with a comforting smile, if it's all right with the mayor, I'll go to school with you. How does that sound? I don't see why not, the mayor said, nodding with a smile. Really? Oh my gosh, you're the best big sister ever, Pinkie said, hugging her dear sister with all of her might. A big smile was on her face. Octavia smiled in return as she petted her young filly's sister. Pinkie smiled at the warm memory. It was one she hadn't thought about it in a long time. When Pinkie had decided to leave the farm, Octavia was the one who had been willing to help her adjust to life outside of it. Her parents seemed to understand and stayed behind to let their kids experience the world. Octavia had been the biggest help in the world to her while they were at school. She gave her in confidence to boost to meet new ponies, as she made so many friends. She was also the reason why she had met Mr. and Mrs. Cakes and ended up staying with them. It was after that year of school Octavia decided to leave on her own to her own adventures, having discovered her love of the contrabass and musical music. She had been sad to see her sister go, but she understood that she had to live on her own life. Besides, she had left her in the care of some wonderful friends. Pinkie walked down rows of the desks with a soft but warm smile on her face. The room certainly gave her plenty of happy memories to remember. She had stopped before her old desk with remembrance, but noticed a piece of paper lying on top of it. "What's this?" she asked, before taking a quick breath, blowing the dust off the paper. Sitting on her desk was a little foal's drawing. Oh, it was a picture of a family smiling on a rock farm. She gently placed a hoof against it. It was one of her old drawings. She smiled as she remembered her fondness that she had for doodling during class. She could see her old house in the background, her mouth and her mother and father, just standing behind their kids in the foreground. She smiled at the cute scribbling of her and Octavia. "Wait," she said, suddenly realizing something. She took her hoof away from the picture and stared at it. Something was wrong with this picture, but she couldn't put a hoof on it. "It's my family, but that would give me the impression something's wrong." She stared at the happy family of the four. She couldn't fight the strong urge to know if there was something wrong with the picture. But no matter how she racked her brain, nothing seemed to come to her mind. She scrutinized the picture carefully. I'm sure if Octavia was here, she would know what the problem was. Pinky shook her head softly. She always was the smartest out of us. If we were in trouble, she would always say, bail us out. Her words stopped dead. Alright, fine. I'll play with you, but only if you're so insistent. Her eyes shot back to the paper as she scanned it through and counted the number of people in her family once more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? She counted out loud as she pointed to the empty slot that could have been contained her other sister. Where's Bellamina? Where's my younger sister? She scoured the picture for any sign of her. She would have drawn a picture of her family without her, would she? Wait, come to think of it, when was the last time I ever thought about Bellamina? She then asked herself quietly. She then remembered talking about Octavia several times over the years, but she never thought about Bellamina. Oh my gosh, I must be the worst sister in the world, she said, feeling so rotten for having to forget about her other sister. She tried to recall the memories of her sister desperately, but the only thing that came to her mind was the story of how she got her cutie mark. But beyond that, she then shook her head furiously, trying to get a jog loose of the memory. But she didn't remember anything else. She looked down somberly before slamming a hoof against the ground. I'm so sorry, Bellamina. I promise you, once I get out of here, I'll keep you in my thoughts, Pinky said, determined now. She had to escape the horrors that had been falling on Ponyville. She looked around the classroom, her eyes being drawn from the desk next to hers, the one Octavia had sat during the school. On the desk was a red circle with a X through written on it in red marker. She carefully grabbed the edge of the desk and opened on top of it, looking inside. Inside one of the desks was a blue jewel, carved into the shape of the contrabrass. Wow, it's beautiful, Pinky gasped, examining the item, but she wasn't sure what it was doing here. She knew she had a strong feeling that something was she meant to keep, but she picked it up carefully, before placing it gently in her bag. She closed Octavia's desk before realizing that she could check upon her desks as well. She was careful not to disturb the picture, and was opened hers as well. Inside was the red jewel in the shape of a balloon. She quickly placed it inside of her bag as well. She closed the desk and looked around. No other desks appeared to have any significance on them. She then headed to the front of the class, checked the teacher's desk, and there was a note written on the desk. At the eve of the switch from the night to day, the red moon will shine. Another riddle? Pinky asked out loud to no one. But this was certainly made less sense than the last riddle she had tried to solve. On top of her head, she couldn't figure out what this riddle was trying to tell her. She twirled her head around and then she heard a laughter of foals coming from down the hall once more. She quickly exited out of the room and looked around the hallway for them. She saw them further down playing with each other. She slowly approached them, trying to get a better look at the two little foals. However, once she got close enough, they began to run down the hallway. She gave the chase. The little foals didn't run off too far. They quickly made a turn to the other room. Pinky stopped right in front of the door and read janitor's closet. On the front, she heard a click coming from the door, as if it had just been unlocked. She then reached for the handle and opened it, and walking into the closet. The room didn't look anything like the janitor's closet should. Rather than the shelves of items for cleaning, it was mostly empty. At the opposite side of the door stood a small knee-high-pitched pedestal, and then beside it, what looked like a door with the clock symbols around it, in between two portraits of the princesses. Oh, is that the lantern oil? She then asked. She walked up to the small pedestal, noticing a small bottle of yellow liquid. She sniffed it in to take a quick confirm, before picking it up and placing it in her bag. Good, that should keep me stocked for a while. She then walked down towards closer to look at the door. She then looked to the left end of the door, and it was a picture of a Princess Luna, gracefully drawn in her body in a circle, surrounding a small hole in the wall. Princess Celestia was drawn much the same way, so surrounding the small hole in the wall. Wait, this hole. I know this shape, she said, having noticed something about the hole Celestia was surrounding. She quickly reached into her bag and pulled out the red balloon jewel and gently fit it into the hole. It snapped into place with a satisfying click. "Then that means the other jewel must go here," she said, placing the blue contrabass underneath Luna's picture. When the second jewel clicked into place, the clock moved forward out the door a little, followed by the symbols placed in the circle around it. She then looked carefully at the symbols. There were 6 pictures: 3 suns, 1 red, 1 yellow, 1 blue, and 3 moons, 1 white, 1 green, and 1 red. Wait, a clock and a moon. The words then from the teacher's desk came to mind. It's the eve of the switch from night to morning. The night is PM and the morning is AM, and they switch 12, the moon will glow at that time. She then placed her hand against the dial of the symbols and turned it, placing the red moon just so it was directly above the number 12 on the clock. She then moved her hands away from the clock to point at the number as well. The clock chimed 12 times as the dial moved back to the door. Before the door opened up and rose into the ceiling, opening the path, Pinky quickly walked into the next room. "Huh?" she asked. Her ear twitched. She had been a very quiet sound, and it sounded like it was coming from the Ponyville itself. She recognized it as it was a siren. A siren was blaring in the distance. She wasn't sure what it meant, but she had the gut instinct that it didn't mean any good. She focused on the room before her. She regretted it instantly. The room itself gave off a stench of rotting. The ceiling was brown with missing tiles, the walls were a mess of peeling, rotted walls, and the floor was covered in dirt, mold, and grime. The holes littered in the room, revealing a mesh of iron grating behind them. Apparently the foundation holding the room together. 2 dead ponies hung from the corners of the room, their bodies wrapped in some sort of cloth, but their blood splattered against the walls and the roof around them. They hung by the chains and the metal that kept them suspended. On the wall between them was a single word written in blood: "Run." She didn't need to be told twice as she ran out of the room. She ran out of the janitor's closet and back into the hallway. "Wait, what happened to the light?" she asked as the hallway she entered was pitch black. She quickly reached into her bag and pulled out her lantern. The flame came to life, illuminating the hallway. She gasped as the hallway was no longer that of a calm, quiet school's, but instead was made of the same decapitated materials as the room she just escaped. Everything was rotting, held together by a metal grating. The grime covered the floor in splotches, and blood caked the walls. Hanging bodies of ponies were visible on various intervals down the hall. The smell of it was so much rotting gagged Pinky. If it not for the lantern in her mouth, she would have lost her stomach. The sound of the static hit her ears. Her heart started pounding as she heard the footsteps echoing down the hall. She turned to the direction of the footsteps, listening to a hiss of the static grow louder as the footsteps grew closer. Her brain was screaming at her to run, listen to the wall, and put every force of power in her hooves. But she seemed stuck, almost glued to the spot. This feeling wasn't like the other monsters. This sensation was piercing right down to her very soul. This feeling was biting into her and was forcing her feet to stay. The edge of the light hit the creature, and it walked further into the edge of her light, and she felt her heart stop for just a brief moment. It was one of the monsters from her nightmare. It was tall, slender pony that towered over her. It had no face. Its skin clung to its face, and its body as if it was attached directly to its bones. It was pale, deathly pale, accentuated by the black suit and red tie that it wore on its torso. It continued to take slow, careful steps towards her. Every hoof step echoed in her brain, like if it was trying to grate in her mind. The phonograph erupted into this loud, high-pitched ringing as she felt the pain struck in her mind. She finally let herself no longer glued to the spot, and with every ounce of strength she had, she turned around and ran. Her heart jumped into her throat and beat the way in a mile of the minute as her hooves connected loudly with the single step she took. She didn't care about the grime or the bodies she passed. She just had to get away. Her mind grated with the feeling of haze of the creature what seemed to be bringing its presence. The loud ringing from the phonograph seemed to be the only thing that kept her mind in every state of mind to run as fast as she could. She rounded the corner, And with the lightning speed, she was putting everything into this. She knew she could run fast. She could keep up with, if not outrun Rainbow Dash at times. She had to be losing the slender pony she had been escaping. She dared to look over her shoulder. It was keeping up with her. It seemed to only be walking. Somehow a slow-paced canter as it struck to keep up. And this whole being seemed a little bit slide towards her, as if there was no escaping. Her mind reeled as she whipped her head forward, trying to go faster. She had tried to turn the corner. Her hoof got caught under her legs, and she nearly fell, scrambled to her legs, and took off again. Scrah! A blood-curdling scream followed out before her as she saw her half of the white filly started to crawl straight towards her. She jumped for it, and its tongue pressing over her hooves as it tried to bite her. The screams of the filly were cut short as the sound of it being crushed by the monster chasing her. Her stomach hit with the heart inside her throat as her lungs burned. Her mind was reeling and the haze was growing. I can't escape. I can't escape. I can't escape. I can't escape. I can't escape! The words yelled and flung themselves into the air at every corner of her mind. She felt as if she was going to die. This monster was about to kill her, and there was nothing she could do about it. Her eyes flung open as she saw the end of the hallway of an open door. An exit? Her mind screamed as she continued to book it. She raced as fast as she could, trying to ignore the constant looming presence of the tree threat behind her. She had to get to the door. She was almost there. Just a little closer, just a little closer. She was going to make it. She jumped, passing straight through the open door and skidding to the halt at the end of the room. Her heart instantly sank as she looked around. The room was a square with one entrance, no exit. She had jumped straight into a dead end with that monster behind her. She looked around frantically. The room was adorned with party decorations, multicolored streamers, balloons caked with blood, vile-looking snacks, poorly wrapped rotting gifts, hanging ponies at every corner, a seal of blood drawn out of the floor. She instantly turned around, watching as the slender pony gradually walked into the room. The only opening of the room sealed shut, with the iron gate behind it. There was no escaping now. She was trapped in the same room as the monster. She dropped the lantern from her mouth, no longer able to hold on to it as she panted frantically. The lantern rolled into the center of the room, turning itself upright, and in the center of the blood-drawn seal. The seal uplit was glowing red, filling up the whole room with light. She could see the red-hued slender pony as it walked towards her. "Stay back," she yelled as she ran into the gifts. She began grabbing one of them and throwing them at the pony. The gifts struck the pony as it seemed to stun him for a moment, but as the gifts hit him, they fell into the ground and burst into a pile of ash. They slowed his walk down for a moment, but soon they didn't even faze him. She grabbed the last gift and tossed it with all of her might, straight at its head, and it struck him before blowing up into a pile of ash. Pinky cried out in pain as she felt that her forehead was splitting open as her vision hazed into oblivion. She then stomped her hooves down and ran blindly in the direction away from the pony. Her vision returned as she felt blood trickling down between her eyes. Dripping off her nose, she then opened up the fresh wound on her head. She grabbed the table, holding the vile snacks on top of it, and tossed it to the ground. She then raised her hind legs up, and with all her might, she kicked the table straight at the slender pony. The whole table struck him and pushed him back. He then hit the wall as the table seemed to hold him in place for a moment. Pinky panted and started at the creature. He got up and pushed the table gently, and with all the table fell apart into a pile of ash. Pinky's legs gave away underneath her as she fell to her knees. Her tears fell from her eyes as she sobbed in pain. The exhaustion, she couldn't fight this monster. It was too much for her. Her mind reeled down as she wanted to accept her death. Her body couldn't take it. Her mind couldn't take it. She then felt her mind begin to hurt worse. The slender pony was drawing closer. She couldn't even look at him. She sobbed with her eyes shut, just wanting the horror to end once and for all. The pain stopped. The hoof steps of the pony stopped getting closer. The ringing of the phonograph was dying down. Pinky then dared to open her eyes and looked up. He was still there, but he had stopped its assault on her. It looked like as if he was looking away from her, at something she couldn't see. And that's when she heard it, the siren. The siren was going off again in the distance. The slender pony put one of its hooves onto the ground, then turned to look at Pinky. She braced for whatever he was going to do, but he just stood there. Then slowly he lowered his head in his suit, pulled out a small brown box. He placed it on the ground before turning around and walking away from her. The light in the room dimmed until it was pitch black. The light from the lantern began to bring a gentle glow to the room. Pinky hiccuped, taking in a huge breath of air that burned in her lungs again. She could feel that her heart was still racing at top of the speed. She began to get her bearings. The room wasn't the one she had just been in. It looked like a normal basement. It had pipes and fixtures that controlled the water and heating throughout the building. Her lantern lay on its side of the middle of the room, glowing its gentle flame. The brown box was still there, where the slender pony had left it. Words failed Pinky. She couldn't have the strength to get up at the moment, so she lowered her head and let herself sob again.